What's up, everybody? Andrew Cooper here. This is Coop's Fantasy Football Fiasco on Fantasy Alarm. And today, since we're getting so close to the NFL draft and so close to the Dynasty rookie drafts, we're skewing towards Dynasty. Obviously, we have the best ball guide coming out. We've been doing best ball, all that stuff, but we want to do some Dynasty here. Next week, all next week with the draft and everything is going to be all rookie stuff. On Wednesday, we're going to have Brandon Huffman, legendary scout, come on. Following the draft, we're going to have Thor Nystrom come on to break down the rookie ranking. So that's going to be all covered. What I wanted to do today is do one last look at a dynasty startup, right? If you're not involved in dynasty yet, now is the time to get in a league and do a draft. This one included the rookies, but a lot of times you do the draft now and then you have the rookie draft after the draft, right? So if you want to get involved in all the hype and the rookie draft stuff, you can do that now. Go to myffpc.com, use promo code Coop. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. The link is in the description there. Everything's ready to go. So you can get that set up. What we're going to do today is go through, and instead of putting the draft board up where nobody can see what's going on, I'm going to go through and look at the individual teams, and we'll get an idea of what direction these teams are going in. I'll let you know if it's a team I would draft, the style I would draft, and what I would do, and just kind of give you an idea of what these teams end up looking like so you can avoid some mistakes when you get started with your rookie drafts. The advice that I give people is this. Sometimes you want to go in thinking, I'm going to play to win now, or you think I'm going to play for the future. That's okay, right? You can steer yourself in that direction. What I typically do is I go in and I let the draft dictate that. At the very beginning of my drafts, what I do is I draft young players that are currently good. Those should be the first guys coming off the board regardless. Justin Jefferson is good, and he will be good for a long time. Any sort of build, Justin Jefferson fits within that build, 100%, right? That's how the first couple rounds for me go. And while I'm doing that, I look around and I see what other people are doing, what direction they're going in. And that kind of dictates what direction I go after that. Because at a certain point, you will have to decide one way or another whether you want to go for young upside plays or trade your picks away for future picks, or if you want to lean into guys that might be older and play to win now. I mean, drafting running backs at all, arguably, you should be playing to win now. That's what I like to do. You draft the young studs right away and look around. And ideally for me, because I like to win, I like to play to win. I like to put my name on the trophy and the money in my pocket now, and then keep winning. It's not like if you win now, you just have to lose later. You can just keep winning if you're good at this, right? If you tank now, then you can't win now. You can only win later. But sometimes that's the way to go. If everybody in your draft is playing to win now, then play for the future. You get an advantage. If everybody's playing for the future, that's what I like to see. I like to see everybody else letting all the value fall to me and the guys that are win now players, right? And in this draft, we're going to look at, I'll give you a little spoiler, a little teaser. One of the teams did that. And one of these teams is in a position to win right away. There were a few teams that could win. One team specifically looking like they're going to be the top competitor here. So why don't we get into this? What I did is hopefully it'll look all right on the screen here. I took the teams and just broke them down. So this is team one, right? And just broke them down the positions. I didn't include the kickers and defenses because, they all went in the later rounds. It's just, it's not something. Sorry, Linda, and sorry, ID. I mean, this isn't even IDP, but sorry to the kicker, the DST fans of the world. We're not going to worry about that for the show. So this first team here went with a balanced build, right? So you can go in now. You can play for the future, or you can go balanced. My advice to people that are going balanced is this. If you're going to go with a balanced build, give yourself a chance to win now and make sure you have ways to trade if you're going to compete this year or if you're not going to compete. The thing about the balanced build is that actually requires people think, some people think that you can just sit back and do like a balanced build and just kind of let it play out. If you go with a balanced build, you actually have to be more active than everybody else because as the season goes on, you kind of want to figure out what direction you're going to go into. Are you going to win this year? Are you not? Right. So with this team, right, Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Love, Bryce Young at quarterback, they're set for quarterback for a long time, most likely. Right. With the wide receivers, they have enough starters. They went out and got 3 guys that can start right away: T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, and then they took some upside stabs on some younger players with Marvin Mims, Romeo Doubs, Michael Wilson. At running back, they went Javonte Williams, and then they oddly leaned into younger running backs here. And to me, uh, this team with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, they could have been in a spot to compete now, but right now they're not. They have to make a move unless Trey Benson or Jalen Ray end up being like a rookie breakout, right? Because Chase Brown's got competition, J.K. Dobbins has competition. There's no real RB2 on the team, and they don't really have a clear flex play either, right? So for those unaware, I didn't really get into the setup. This is FFPC, so it's all tight end premium. This is a single QB league, and you have 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and a flex, right? So with this team, this person has set themselves up, honestly, to have to make a trade at some point, right? If they're going to compete now, unless they hit right away, they're going to need to trade for a running back, and they might need to trade for tight end. We'll get to the tight end in a second, but they're set up where they might need to trade for a running back if they want to compete now, trade away future picks, or trade away guys like Mims or Dubs or Michael Wilson, or even a Jordan Love if they have to in a single QB league, right? At that Trey Benson pick, when I was looking at the board, they could have taken Najee Harris, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson. This team with one of those guys, any of those guys, could be a team that's not only able to compete now, but has some longevity, right? So for me, I didn't love that's where, obviously I'm a guy that likes Higgins, Pittman, Evans. The quarterbacks are great. And they even waited to the very last 2 rounds to take tight end with Greg Dulcich and Hunter Henry, which I don't mind that at all. I think they gave themselves a shot at upside. Those guys could be top 2 targets on the team. It is tight end premium. I think they did all right there. It's at running back where I think this team missed the mark just on not getting a second RB2. Because what happens if this team isn't competing this year? What do you want? Like, what's the plan with a guy like you might have to turn around right away and trade Mike Evans. You might have to turn around and trade either of these tight ends or trade Javonte Williams. Even I know he's young, but with the knee injury and the way running backs age, it's tough to flip and turn for the future. I think this team was very conservative in what they did, which is fine. But it's not they didn't have a clear direction. I would have liked it a lot better if they took another second RB here, but again, not terrible in what they did. The next team we're going to look at here, the second team. This team came out and again, the first 3 teams we'll look at here went kind of balanced. These are dynasty teams, so obviously you want to skew youth with your early picks, right? So, taking a quarterback, they look pretty good with Josh Allen. Obviously, they took some stabs on some rookies. They've got 3 wide receivers that can start right away on Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin. So they are playing to win now. And at running back, unlike the other team we looked at, they did take 2 running backs they can start right away, and Josh Jacobs and Rashad White. And I also think Jonathan Brooks could potentially start right from the rip, especially if he goes to the Cowboys. And I like Ramondre Stevenson. So this team, through the first 3 positions, is ready to compete now and mixed in a little youth with a little Adonai Mitchell, Frank Gore Jr. Where they missed the mark on this team is tight end. It's tight end premium, so you get a little bit of a boost, but nobody in that tight end group is really a top 2 target on the team. I would have liked this team, even a Hunter Henry probably has more upside than the 3 guys I have here. And I am a Chigakonkwo fan, but Michael Mayer behind Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams. Chigakonkwo is clearly behind Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins now. K-Dot clearly behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Maybe what they did is said, hey, you know what? If one of those 6 players gets hurt, now I have a guy that can be a top 2 target on their team. And if that's what they were going for, I think that's not bad. But they really should have done a little bit better to give themselves a guy that can compete now. Because as you're going to see with some of these teams, this team looks pretty good right now. Like you're like, oh wow, Josh Allen, Ayuk, Diggs, McLaurin. Like this team looks pretty decent because of the top heavy nature of Dynasty and because of the way some of these other teams panned out later on. You're going to look at this team and wonder if they actually can compete. That's the rub. You got to figure out the direction that you're going to move in a dynasty league because it's a cyclical game and the people that are going all in now do have better odds to win and the people that play for the future do have better odds down the road. And the worst thing you could be is middle of the pack. Because when you come in fifth or sixth or seventh, you don't have a shot to win and you miss out on all the high end options in the draft, in the rookie draft, right? So this team in particular, I think what they did is fine, but it's going to be ugly if they turn around and guys like Stevenson and Jacobs age and Diggs and McLaurin, especially Diggs, if he's not if he's not a wide receiver one the next year or two, they could end up being stuck in no man's land with this team. And the third team off that we're going to look at here kind of did something very similar. Again, you take Justin Jefferson in the first round, you can't miss there. You can go in any direction you want with this build. This team could have played to win now. They could have played for the future. What they went for, like a lot of these teams, is they went for a balanced build. And again, like we talked about earlier on the show, if you're going balanced build, you need to be active and you are just kind of pushing the decision off. You're pushing the decision on which direction to go off to later in the draft. So for those listening at home, here's the team for this guy. I should do a better job of that for the listeners. Sorry about that. QB, CJ Stroud, Drake May, Aaron Rodgers, right? So they went with Stroud, rock solid. They went upside play with May, and they threw Rodgers in at the very end, which pick was a little strange to me in a single QB league. Other teams, I think, should have gone for a guy like that, but is what it is. Wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, Cooper Kupp, Lad McConkey, Gabe Davis, Alec Pierce. So a mix of age and youth. Running back, Travis Etienne, David Montgomery, Austin Eckler, Bucky Irving, Isaiah Davis. Again, a mix of both. And then at tight end, they've got TJ Hawkinson, Cole Kmet, Tyler Conklin. Quick shout out to the folks in the chat. Toronto Dave, PPR Management, thanks for popping in. Definitely feel free to throw in any questions, any comments on these as we go along. But I'm just checking out some teams, giving people just an idea of how to operate, which directions to go in when you're doing one of these drafts. So this team with this balanced build, right? They can compete now, or they can play for the future. They have like I said, a good mix of young and old guys. But in my opinion, when you draft a team like this, you better be ready to trade. By week 3, 4, 5, you're gonna know if your team is good enough or if it's not. And if this team is playing to win, you need to be willing to go out and potentially trade your picks, potentially trade Lad McConkey and Bucky Irving and some of these young guys and Drake May, and potentially trade those guys away to push the chips and win this year. Because this team is strong, but it's not, win the league strong, and it's definitely not deep, right? You've got your starting 3 wide receivers and then Lad McConkey and Gabe Davis. So they might have to push the chips. On the flip side, if this team starts out like 1-4, 1-5, you got to turn around and try to make moves. You have to turn around and say, okay, we're not going to win now. Let's retool for the future. And specifically, you should be trading Aaron Rodgers for anything, Austin Eckler probably for anything. Cooper Kupp should be traded as well, right? And then, with TJ Hawkinson, he's going to start slow most likely because of the injury. And Cole Kmet and Tyler Conklin to round out the tight ends. I really don't like. Again, I'm trying on this show to look more at the build and the direction and the style of play. But Cole Kmet and Tyler Conklin are just not players I'm drafting, because Cole Kmet is now rotating with Gerald Everett behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. What's the upside? And Tyler Conklin behind Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams with a quarterback that spreads the ball out and Breece Hall that commands targets. And it's being tagged as one of the number 1 rookie tight end destinations. I just have no interest in drafting those players. So the strategy wise, it is what it is. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I just probably wouldn't have drafted those guys. But this team just when people think, oh, I'll be conservative, I'll do a balanced build, you're setting yourself up to almost have to trade, right? So if it's going well, push the chips and go in. If it's not going well, you got to get something back for Rodgers, Eckler, Kupp before the wheels fall off, and then you end up just stuck in the middle, which is brutal. And Jack, I agree with you on that. I do like the stack of CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. Those stacks are huge, and I think that Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs are going to be the guys right away. So, and Victor, that's what I'm talking about. It could blow up or completely fall in your face, and that I'm okay with drafting teams like that as long as you're an active player, and you're a smart player, and you can recognize that. Because if this team turns around and trades Cup and Rogers and Eckler for picks, well, you have Stroud and May and Jefferson and Nico Collins and McConkey and Etienne and Monty. Those guys aren't going anywhere. TJ Hawkinson as well still has many good years left. And with those picks, you can retool, and now you're looking good. But if you just sit and let those assets rot on your team and potentially retire on your team, that's getting stuck in the middle. So that's that team. Team four here. I do like what Team four did. Team four. This is the draft board isn't in front of us. It was just too. It would have been too small. It wouldn't have looked good on the screen. And again, we have a lot of audio listeners, but this is your typical uh, zero RB team. This team started with six straight wide receivers. So this team started drafting Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Rashi Rice, Brian Thomas Jr. They leaned into the fact that wide receivers have great longevity, and they went for just the best young wide receivers they could get. I like that move. They also took Tez Walker as a rookie. At quarterback, they have Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa. I love those two quarterbacks options. I mean, Kyler Murray, say what you will, he's the top five fantasy quarterback all time in terms of fantasy points when you average it by points per game. And Tua also, just he's a great option with great pass catchers. So that right there is the longevity side of things. And this person also did give themselves some outs to compete this year. So they have great longevity there. And then they drafted Tony Pollard, who's still young enough, and he's a starter. And then they drafted Pat Fryermuth, who could be a top two target on his team and could compete now. So they have the bones that they need to compete now if things break their way, right? With the youth and with everything. What they would have to do, though, this team obviously is going to be trying to hit the running back off waivers, or they're going to be have to trade for running back because this is the running back room. Tony Pollard, Zach Charbonnet, Jaleel McLaughlin, Ty Chandler, Donta Foreman, Dylan Lobb, the rookie out of UNH. Chat, let me ask you guys, if this is your team, who is your RB2 week one, right? Are you going to be able to win the championship in this league with your RB2 in your lineup every week being Zach Charbonnet or Jaleel McLaughlin? Or I guess Donta Foreman if Nick Chubb starts slow. Like that's the thing here is that this team is filled with youth. The tight ends are Luke Musgrave, Pat Fryermuth, Jelani Woods. This team has a lot of youth, and they're clearly playing for the future. Uh, they just have it's a difficult path to winning this year, right? They could win, and they might have to trade to get that done, but that's what they're looking at. And again, with the way they started with the wide receivers and QBs, I would not have on this particular team gone out of my way to draft a older RB2 just to try to push the envelope. I would rather trade for one. So I actually like this build. I like what they did. They're playing for the future. I usually play to win now, but if you're going to play for the future, starting your draft with six wide receivers, five of which are already NFL wide receiver ones, twos, and threes in Chase, Olave, Smith, Flowers, Rice, that's the way to do it. This team has the building blocks to be good for a long time. And all they have to do when they're ready, when they think they're ready to win, is trade for a running back. And as we just talked about with the past team, that team could be in a situation to trade away a running back. So I like this team. This is a solid play for the future team, right? Team five is another one of those teams that didn't really have a direction with the older young players. So QB, they went Brock Purdy and Justin Fields. Now, in a one QB draft, there are a bunch of QBs that went undrafted. So I actually don't hate going with Purdy and Fields. They took Fields way earlier than I would ever dream of taking a backup quarterback, considering they're starting quarterbacks on waivers. But for their bye week fill in, they could just add like Derek Carr. Derek Carr didn't get drafted in this. There's a bunch of guys just floating around that they could add just for a 1 week fill in. So I don't hate that move there, but um, the Justin Fields one doesn't make much sense to me. At wide receiver, they went with a mix of young and old. They started off taking CeeDee Lamb and Drake London, which I love. Those are their first two picks, and you can go any direction. Young players that are going to be good for a long time. They ended up going with Devontae Adams with their wide receiver three, which to me you would think, okay, let's go all in and try and win now. if you're going with the Devontae Adams. They also added Deontay Johnson, Troy Franklin, Chris Godwin, Javon Baker, Rashad Bateman. So this team has strong enough wide receivers to compete now. At running back, they went Joe Mixon. And to me, again, if you're taking a Joe Mixon, you're a win now team. So the next running back they took is the one that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Why draft Marshawn Lloyd? Right? Why draft a running? We don't even know where he's going to go in the draft, if he's going to be fantasy relevant or even a starter. Why draft him when there were guys available, older guys that would help you win now? And they even did come back and take Aaron Jones, who's going to be their RB2. They took Chuba Hubbard, they took Jerome Ford. If I'm this team, I take Devontae Adams, I'm playing to win now. And I probably don't take Marshawn Lloyd there again. Some people they think in their mind that you want to be conservative and mix, yeah, and mix older and younger guys to, and the reality is a lot of times that puts you in a tough spot, and it makes you have to be a more active manager. I like what they did at tight end. They drafted Trey McBride. They then traded a fifth round pick or sixth round pick to get Evan Ingram, which in the tight end premium format, that player is going to be starting for them right away. If you're trading away picks again, then you're in now, right? I love the idea of trading away picks to win now. If you're going to go all in, then go all in. Don't draft Troy Franklin, Javon Baker, Marshawn Lloyd, right? Don't draft those guys. Don't draft Eric All as a tight end. Go in now and push the chips now. And yeah, better boss. Field starting in Pittsburgh would definitely help this team out, but I mean, it's probably a year off from seeing that unless things completely derail with Russell Wilson. So this is another team where, again, because of what they did in the draft, they're setting themselves up to have to trade. They're going to have to trade away future pick. If they want to compete, they might have to trade away future picks, trade away Marshawn Lloyd, trade away Troy Franklin to go all in now. And on the flip side, if they aren't winning, say Brock Purdy gets hurt and they don't even have a starting quarterback, then you got to trade away Devontae Adams and trade away Joe Mixon and probably Evan Ingram as well. So again, you no clear direction with this team. Which with some of these teams, as we move through here, you're going to see some. And when you look at a team like this and say, okay, yeah, they might be able to win or whatever, you'll say, wow, it's going to be very difficult for a team like this to beat with some of these other ones. So this team here, I love how they started. This team, they started Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor. And from a pure fantasy point start, this team for the first two rounds was looking like a team that could compete and win right away, right? Like once you draft running backs like that with the short shelf life for those players, you would think that this team would be in. And then they came back and they drafted DJ Moore and drafted Jalen Hurts and drafted George Kittle, right? So this team has the a number of guys that are compete now guys. They even drafted Kirk Cousins later on, which is a compete now guy, which again, if they just leaned into that, this team could have been one of the top competing teams right now. Instead, they kind of got a little wishy-washy at wide receiver with their next two wide receiver picks, where they took Tank Dell and Jaden Reed. And I like Tank Dell and Jaden Reed in Dynasty as long-term plays. But for me right now, when these teams have Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, and they have Christian Watson and Romeo Dubs, and Tank Dell and Jaden Reed might not be full-time players, I just would have, if I was running this team and I took Bijan and took Jonathan Taylor and took DJ Moore, when they took Tank Dell and Jaden Reed, both those players, all these players were on the board. Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Deontay Johnson, both at the Tank Dell spot and the Jaden Reed spot. And if the starting lineup for this team was Jalen Hurts, DJ Moore, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, George Kittle, this could have been the team that wins the league this year. With what they did, they need a lot of help because they went with running backs, which are a short lifespan position. They went with George Kittle, who's 30. They went with Kirk Cousins, who's obviously old and coming off an Achilles. And then they drafted Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, Christian Kirk, Jonathan Mingo, Wandale Robinson, and kind of went older on wide receivers, right? And Kevin Tompkins points out on the chat, Jaden Reed is fool's gold pick in dynasty startups when you can get just as good shots at the top Packers wide receiver much later. And I'm fully with you on that, man. And I know for a fact that Kev also still likes Jaden Reed as a player, right? Like we like Jaden Reed for the long term. But if you're playing to win now, man, I mean, you could get Christian Watson, you could get Romeo Dubs, and those two dudes are playing every snap for this team. Romeo Dubs led the team in snaps and targets and touchdowns. And Christian Watson, every time he was healthy, was a full time player. Like, I just, I felt with this particular team that they did everything right at three positions, and then in wide receiver they fell for that same trap where it's like I have to go for you, and you don't have to. You can just win the league, right? So I think what they should have done, in my opinion, was go for wide receivers in that range that had some more pop this year, right? And you can still trade for that, but that's just we're splitting hairs to some degree when we're looking at other people's teams. And again, if you think you could do better, then you should, right? And the way to do that is go to myffpc.com, use promo code Coop. They'll give you 25 bucks when you deposit 35 or more, and you could get in and do startups like this right now, right? So the best ball drafts are closed until the draft is over. It's startup time right now. You do a startup over the next week or so, and then do you either take rookies in the draft or do your rookie draft after the NFL draft, and now you're in. And now you got something to do during the offseason as we lead in to the NFL season. So go over to myffpc.com, use promo code Coop. They'll give you 25 bucks when you deposit 35 or more, and you can use all these tips, strategies today on what we're doing here. Now, let's get to team 7 here, because team 7 is the exact example. And a lot of people watching the show or listening to the show are probably listening to some of these teams and saying, you know what? I don't know why Coop's going so hard on this team. Why is he giving this team such a hard time? Because they can win now and they have a lot of young players. Like I think that team's great. I think that team sounds like a team I would draft and redraft and win now. What you're not realizing is that within this draft, there are teams that are playing strictly for the future, and there are teams that are playing to win now. And those teams are trading with each other within the draft and after the draft, knowing that, okay, I'm going to win later. This team's going to win now. And here's the perfect example. Team 7. This team, Team 7, they have the number one running back in Christian McCaffrey, the number one wide receiver in Tyreek Hill, and the number one tight end in Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey. They also have last year's QB3, Dak Prescott, right? So this team went Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Bo Nix at QB. At wide receiver, they went Tyreek Hill, Debo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Quentin Johnston, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Darnell Mooney. At wide receiver, they have Christian McCaffrey, Isaiah Pacheco, Alvin Kamara, Zamir White, Tank Bigsby, Tyrone Tracy. At tight end, they have just Travis Kelce and Theo Johnson. This team is the best team in the league. This team is probably going to win the league if everything goes according to plan. And they could trade picks and add pieces along the way. So if there's an injury or something comes up, that's not stopping them. So I guess the one knock on this team is they actually didn't trade any of their future picks in the draft for more players. The moment I draft McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill, like this team did at the very top of the draft, I'm taking my picks in future rookie drafts and I'm selling them all. If I can get another fourth or fifth, I did this in my own startup where I went in and then I traded away my first round pick for DK Metcalf and just said, you know what? If I'm playing now, my rookie picks, this team is going to be a top team in the league. The rookie picks for this team are going to be at the back end of the draft anyway. Trade those picks away. So whoever this guy is, he should have traded away during the draft, but I would turn around and trade them away now and push the chips. But you look at a bunch of those other teams, and yeah, they looked fine. But did they look Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Debo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Alvin Kamara, Dak Prescott, Travis Kelce fine? No. So if you're going to go in, you got to go in, right? Again, you might be able to sneak by and sneak a win, but this team is going to be tough for these teams to battle with, right? So it was smart for this team to lead into what they were going to do. Obviously, you can pepper in some young players like the Bo Nixes and Theo Johnsons down the stretch, but they made sure they were covered at all their starting spots, right? So this team's ready to rock right now. This team, of all the teams, looks most like a team that I would draft because I play to win. And honestly, as I said, my team would be even more lopsided. I'd be drafting like Adam Thielen and whoever and trading away my picks and playing to win now. So yeah, that's a good one there of a team going in now. The next team that drafted right after this team did the exact opposite. And this is what we're talking about with some teams going in now and some teams playing for the future. So this team went all, sorry, excuse me, almost all youth here, right? And again, this isn't even the team that did went the farthest in. Like one of these teams, as you'll see, went way into the future, maybe even too far into the future. But this team went youth, right? Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence should be good for a long time. Amon Ross, St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Josh Downs, Jamison Williams, Malachi Corley, Jalen Hyatt, Demario Douglas. I don't think a single one of those players is older than 25. If they are, maybe not much older. At running back, there's only one pick here that confuses me. James Cook, young. DeAndre Swift, young enough. Nick Chubb, that pick completely out of the. When I was looking at the board, I thought it had to be a trade, but no, they went with Chubb. Devin Singletary, Antonio Gibson, Alexander Madison. Then at tight end, in a tight end premium league, Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts. Right, this team here, honestly, could win now and they could win multiple times, right? So they have youth that is good youth and can play now. Nick Chubb doesn't really fit the build. If they're not winning right away, you got to trade Nick Chubb immediately. But this team is playing for the future. The thing is, once you look at a team like the team we just looked at, right? This team does not stack up competitively this year. Who is the wide receiver 3 on this team? Josh Downs, Jamison Williams. It doesn't stack up right now, but within the next 2-3 years, this is a team that could absolutely compete to win. And a bunch of these players are just very safe for what they are. Herbert, Lawrence, St. Brown, Waddle, and in my opinion, Bowers and Pitts, very safe players that have 5, maybe 6 more years left to compete, right? Running back, as always, you're just trying to time the window right. But James Cook is young enough, and these guys are young enough that this is a team that's playing to win over the next 2 or 3 years. And I like what they did. They just accumulated value. Some people in Dynasty, it's a popular strategy. Guys like, I think it's Adam Rank is the guy who always says, just take value every round and sort it out later. Again, you got to be active to do that. But this team did pretty well in that respect. Now, this next team that I'm going to bring up here, this is a team that again, I'm somebody that goes all in now, but if I was going to play for the future, I might do something like this. This team really leaned into it, which is what I like to see. If you're not going to go all the way in, then lean into playing for the future. And this team, my goodness, look at the rookies on this squad. Wide receiver, here are the wide receivers: Marvin Harrison Jr., rookie; Malik Neighbors, rookie; Rome Odunze, rookie; Jackson Smith and Jigba, second-year player; Xavier Worthy, rookie; Christian Watson, young player; Roman Wilson, rookie; Xavier Legette, rookie. And then he took Tyler Lockett at the end. He oddly did that in a couple spots here. At QB, he took JJ McCarthy as a starter, and then Matthew Stafford. I'm not sure what his thoughts were there. Maybe trade bait, because this team is not winning now, unless this is the best rookie wide receiver class of all time, and maybe it is. Maybe it's another 2014 where every rookie is just great. But unless that's the case, this team's going to be tough for competing, and it's especially true when you look at the running backs. Here are the running backs: Devon Achane, Braylon Allen, Ray Davis. That's it. Devon Achane, who, if you're drafting a team like this, absolutely great pick because he's in a split backfield now. So you get that value. And then as Raheem Mostert goes off into the sunset, now you get Achane hitting his stride at the same time that Marv and Neighbors and Odunze and Worthy and all these guys hit their stride too. The timing lines up, right? Braylon Allen and Ray Davis as rookies, you're taking stabs. This is also the team when you're talking about leaning into the right ideas. This team did that by trading away their 6th pick. The team that we talked about earlier that drafted Evan Ingram, they traded with this team to get this team's 6th and take Ingram. So this team not only has a bunch of young players, again, it didn't show us on the board what they got back for it, but at that spot in the rookie draft, they probably got back a 1st round pick in next year's rookie draft for that spot. Tight end premium, the Evan Ingram and tight end premium, the guy that just had 19 more receptions than any other tight end, who is probably when you compare him to the wide receivers, probably a top 2 or 3 player in this format in tight end premium. They probably traded a first round pick for Evan Ingram. So this team probably has 2 first round picks. And I think their name, I don't want to give any names away because we want to keep it private. These are high stakes leagues. So like, but the team name had the word tank in there. So going into it, I think they knew they were going to do something like this. Uh, at tight end, they took David Njoku, Dallas Goddard, Darren Waller. A little confusing to me compared to the rest of the team. You would think they would have gone youth there. So I'm wondering if maybe they took guys like Waller and Stafford and Tyler Lockett as trade bait. And if this team can turn around and trade Stafford and Lockett and Waller and Goddard and Joku and those guys for more assets in the future, this is the team that's doing the right thing in terms of playing for the future. It's very scary to take this many, you know, rookie wide receivers in one class. This team could end up being absolutely terrible if this class is just a complete bust. But I mean, at least they leaned into the direction. It's going to be very difficult to compete with that Tyreek Hill team. You might as well go all in and push for the future if you're not doing that. And that's what this team did. And I respect it. Some of these teams have obviously been very critical of. This one isn't exactly what I would do, but at least they have a vision, and it's pretty wild. And I kind of love looking at it. Right, all those rookies, dude, all those rookie wide receivers, and what could be an incredible. He's got the top 3 wide receivers from this class: in Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Roma Dunze, and Xavier Worthy. In a lot of people's opinion, is the wide receiver 4. So he might have the top 4 wide receivers from this class, which I mean that could give this guy a lot of longevity in the format like this. The next team here is Team 10, back to a very cautious build, in my opinion. Again, didn't really have much direction. I do love a lot of the players. This team did get a lot of value, in my opinion, getting Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson. They went at wide receiver. They went Puka Nakua, Jordan Addison, Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Jalen Polk, and Elijah Moore. The name that stands out to me there is Amari Cooper, in that is like that's sitting there with the first going through the first few rounds and saying to yourself, I think I could win now. Is that Amari Cooper pick? Could be tough with this team. I mean, they need those 3 wide receivers to all stay healthy and hit, because there's not a lot down the depth chart with Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir that I trust to be in my lineup every week in a 3 wide receiver lineup. At running back, they took Jameer Gibbs and Kyron Williams. So they started off going with Jameer Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Puka Nakua, Jordan Addison, playing kind of the young man's game. And then just like the Amari Cooper pick, they took James Conner. So in the mid rounds, taking Amari Cooper and James Conner, and then also taking Mark Andrews and Dalton and trading for Dalton Schultz, this team at one point turned around and said, hey, we can win this thing. And I think that's all right. If you want to go with a balanced build and play to win now and still kind of, do the productive straddle the line thing, that's fine. Just got to make sure that you're ready to switch things up at a moment's notice if you're either in it or you're not. So running backs, Jameer Gibbs, Kyron Williams, James Conner, Blake Corum, Audric Estime, and Rico Dowdle. Tight ends are Mark Andrews. I love Mark Andrews for a competing team or a not competing team. I think he's 28 years old. He's got a lot left in the tank. Travis Kelce had his first 1,000-yard season at 27. Zach Ertz had his at 28. Like, Mark Andrews still has a lot of good years. Dalton Schultz, trading for him. Don't really love that pick, but he basically traded up 2 spots to get Schultz. So I don't think he gave much up to get that spot. Maybe like a 3rd or 4th round rookie pick. And they took Juwan Johnson, which is fine. But again, with these balanced builds, you got to be ready to pivot mid-season, right? The base of your team is not going to change. You drafted Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Gibbs, Kyron Williams, Puka Nakua, Jordan Addison. That's the meat and potatoes of your team. You're keeping those guys no matter what. After that, though, decisions probably need to be made mid-season to put yourself either in a position to win now or play for the future. If you're playing to win now, you keep Amari Cooper, James Conner, Andrews, Schultz, and you try and trade away Keon Coleman, Blake Corum, Audric Estime, Jalen Polk, and your rookie picks to push the chips and win. Conversely, if it's not looking good, you probably got to trade Amari, James Conner, Andrews. As long as the person that drafted this team is active and aware of that, great. And I hate to continue beating on the drum, but this is something people got to keep in their mind. If you're somebody that likes to do these like balanced builds, then you got to keep in mind that James Conner has gotten hurt every single year of his career. He's an older player. Running backs do not age well, and that team is in a position to potentially move on from him. And who knows what he's going to be moving forward. So if you don't have your finger on the trigger ready to trade that guy away, if you're not competing this year, then maybe this isn't the format for you because you got to be active in Dynasty if you want to get it done. Uh, so yeah, two more teams left to look at. Team 11, in my opinion, this is the second best team in terms of winning right now. So they have Lamar Jackson, which obviously win now play. Then they took Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, which I think is fine. They're looking for upside at the QB position. When you have Lamar Jackson, who cares who your backup QB is? You just want to go for upside. At wide receiver, they went with Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams, Rashid Shaheed. So much can happen during the season. You can't just draft three wide receivers and say, I'm set. Look at how many injuries there are every single year. A lot of teams that probably think, oh, I'm a good mix of youth and age. They don't realize that they're going to need help. This team at wide receiver should be pretty good. And they leaned into the older guys, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins. At running back, they have Brees Hall and Saquon Barkley. Those are their first and third pick. They went Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, Saquon Barkley. I think that's great. And the moment you could tell in the draft, they noticed the direction they were moving in and leaned into it, which I love. When they took Saquon Barkley, they were like, hey, we got to play to win now. So they have Brees Hall, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Brian Robinson, Raheem Mostert, Zeke Elliott, Miles Sanders. This is one of the only teams that has the depth to win right now without making a trade. So this team doesn't need to be as active as some of the other teams because they're playing to win now and they have the right pieces to do it. They have the depth to do it. The only um, the real big miss here is at tight end. They probably need to trade for a tight end. They need to go to the team that has Mark Andrews or Dalton Schultz because Isaiah Likely is not even a starting tight end. Jatavian Sanders is a rookie. They traded to get Jatavian Sanders during the draft, which was surprising they would trade for a rookie tight end. You would think that they would trade for a tight end that could start for them rather than trading for a rookie. And they took Mike Gesicki. Not really. They're gonna probably need to do something there, but again, you can trade for tight ends. So they could probably just trade for a pick for a tight end, or they could trade one of their rookie quarterbacks for a tight end at some point. So that's I guess the one spot where they are very weak in terms of competing now, and I think they should get on that right away. But this team, as far as competing now, is in the second best spot behind only the Tyreek Hill team, and they might be just as good. It might be just as good because the Tyreek Hill team has a lot of wheels that could fall off right away, with Travis Kelsey and guys like that. So again, you look at some of the other teams in this league, it's going to be tough for them to compete with a team like this that's playing to win now. That's why I like having a direction that you're moving in. And then this last team went again, another team kind of down the middle and probably playing for the future. At quarterback, they only have Anthony Richardson. So at some point, they're going to need to drop somebody, but they have enough kind of rookies that who knows with the draft, they'll be able to drop somebody. Wide receiver, they took A.J. Brown, George Pickens, Marquise Brown, Jahan Dotson. They traded back to get a future pick and took Jacoby Myers. They have Dontavian Wicks, Ricky Purcell, Josh Palmer, and Jermaine Burton. To me, this team, they're clearly on Twitter, whoever drafted this team. When I go through, I can see which people are plugged in with the hype and some of those players. This is one of those teams. They have Jalen Warren, of course, as well. Running back is Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, Tajay Spears, Jalen Warren, Keaton Mitchell. At tight end, they went Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, Ben Sinnott, and I love that. Laporta and Kincaid should be valuable for a long time. Might as well take a stab on Ben Sinnott. They'll probably have to drop a Jermaine Burton or a Ben Sinnott or a Keaton Mitchell for a QB2 at some point because you can't just have one quarterback. But this team again, another middle of the pack team, clearly playing for the future. And this is one where they probably don't have to, everyone's young enough that you don't have to turn around and worry about somebody falling off. Maybe you trade away Jacoby Myers or Najee Harris if things aren't going according to plan. But this team doesn't have to be aggressively active in that. I think the person that drafted this team knows they're probably not going to win this year, but it could be possible. Could be possible. So that kind of wraps up this draft. And again, uh, you can you can get my feelings on it in terms of you know the direction, the style of play, the ways to win, and really my takeaway, the biggest thing to take away is to take value early in your drafts and have a goal, have a game plan, right? Know what you're going to do with once you get to the midpoint of the draft, find leverage. That's the biggest thing here. Find some leverage that's going to help you differentiate yourself from the rest of the league, whether it's winning now or whether it's having so much youth that you're going to win multiple times later. Find that leverage. And a lot of times, almost every time, it's via trading that you create that leverage. So that's it for the show today. Just a quick one here. Just want to mention I've got a couple things coming out here. There's a article up now on quarterbacks on Fantasy Alarm. I did a study, did a lot of deep diving into the math on where quarterbacks, the hits in drafts come from. Definitely check that out because I looked at some studies that have been done in the past. Dave Kluge recently did a great one. That kind of showed that the first quarterback off the board has the best hit rate, right? I wanted to look at the next quarterbacks, where and when to take stabs on them in your drafts, especially in your super flex drafts. And I definitely came across some very interesting information on that. The short and sweet is the QB2 has the best hit rate, and a lot of the top 12 seasons are generated by the second quarterback off the board. Over 50% of the QB1 seasons in fantasy over the last 30 years were from the first or second quarterback off the board. After that, one of the most interesting things that I saw with the QBs 3 and 4 and 5 is this. There are hits at QB3 and QB4 and QB5 throughout the draft, and there's a lot of misses as well. Mathematically speaking, though, it's very rare for the QB3 and QB4 and, of course, QB5 to be hits, as in having a top 12 season at any point, when the QB1 and QB2 are complete busts. In fact, over the last 30 years, it did not happen one time where the QB3 and QB4, or just a QB3. So the QB3, there was not one time where the QB3 was a hit when both the first two quarterbacks before them were busts. You have to go back to Brett Favre in 1991 to find a situation where the QB3 was good and the QB1 and 2 never had a single QB1 season. Now, there are some times through our history where the QB3 ended up being the best QB, even though the QB1 and 2 had some decent seasons, right? Like Jay Cutler, for instance, was better than like Vince Young. Vince Young had a QB9 season, but he fell off pretty quickly. But for the most part, what that teaches us is that when you evaluate the later QBs and decide when you want to take them, you need to decide if this is a deep class or not. Because what you end up having is you have a lot of class where none of the QBs are good. They all bust. And then you have some classes where they're all good. So like when people say, okay, the QB5 can be good because Jalen Hurts was good. Well, yeah, Jalen Hurts was good as the fifth QB off the board, but the QBs before him were Joe Burrow, Tua, Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert, and I mean every one of the QBs that went before Jalen Hurts is a starter, and Jordan Love was the other one. They're all starters in the NFL, right? And then you look at other years where, 2012, 2013, 2014, when none of them started. So the odds of you looking at these quarterbacks and saying, okay, Michael Penix is going to hit as a QB 4 or 5, and every other QB is bad. That's a very difficult and rare needle to thread. If you want to support those QBs, if you think JJ McCarthy and Penix and all these guys are good, the more realistic path is for this to be a just a really top QB draft in general, where all the QBs in this draft at the top are good. That's realistically what you want to envision in your head. And if you believe that's one of these classes, then go ahead and take the QB3 and QB4 and QB5 and support them. If you don't think so, then take a wide receiver instead. And for me personally, I'll be drafting QB1, Caleb Williams first, and then whatever QB goes second will almost certainly be my QB2 in fantasy football because the odds are in your favor drafting it that way. I know there are some outliers, like see, we think CJ Stroud's going to have a better career than Bryce Young at this stage, but for the most part, you're giving yourself the better odds drafting that way. And if you want to see the math on it, that's at Fantasy Alarm right now. That's a free article. We all have all sorts of stuff coming out behind the paywall, all sorts of cool stuff for the members and for people that want to buy some standalone stuff. Specifically, the best ball guide should hopefully be dropping today and will be updated out throughout all the year. So if you become a Fantasy Alarm member right now, go to fantasyalarm.com/win. You get 40% off the entire year. That's not just for football, but for baseball, basketball, hockey, NASCAR, you name it, MMA. We crush all those sports, especially the DFS. If you get set up with that now, you get all the guides. You get the best ball guide, you get the draft guide, you get the baseball guide, you get all the DFS, you get access to the Discord. You can also buy the best ball guide on a standalone basis. So, hey, if you don't want to be a member right now, I'll tell you, you know what? Buy the best ball guide. Check out the information in there. And if you bought that guide and you love the information in there and you want to become a member, send me a DM on Twitter at Coop Fiasco, and I'll talk to the powers that be, and we'll see if we can get that guide kind of taken off the price of your membership. So, as a trial, go buy the guide. Hit me up on Twitter at Coop Fiasco. And if you really love the stuff in there, you believe in the process, you love the rankings and want to become a member, reach out to me directly and we'll help get that sorted out for you, So check that all out. That's coming out soon. And the last thing I want to mention, please, for a great cause right now, it's pinned on my profile on Twitter. We have a charity draft contest going over on Reddit. I would not be doing this if it were not for Reddit. I came up through those Reddit streets in the comments, writing my own posts on there. Eventually, that became this job that I do today, right? And I still hang out on Reddit. I love it over there. We teamed up with Scott Fish to do a challenge, a draft challenge where you donate a little money to charity. You answer a few questions. How many quarterbacks go in the first round? What round will Blake Corum be drafted by the Chargers? You answer those questions, the winners get a ton of stuff. First and foremost, the top 4 or so people get into the Scott Fish Bowl, the most prestigious tournament there is, right? We're also giving away autographed jerseys. We're giving away memberships to everything. We had people from FTN and obviously Fantasy Alarm and football guys and JJ Zacharias, and everybody donated different guides that you can win with this. Not to mention, if you just comment on the thread over on Reddit, you can get in the Scott Fish Bowl or win a best ball guide just by commenting. So go check that out. It's for a great cause, and you can get into the Scott Fish Bowl, the biggest tournament in all of fantasy football land. So thank you guys for supporting a good cause. Thank you, fantasy members, people in the chat. Thank you, Matt Deutsch. That's it for us today. Have a good one.